Breathing in and breathing out. Connecting with yourself. In that connection, allow yourself to identify your own resiliency, your own abilities, your own strength and courage, your own willpower, and your own clarity. Recognize and acknowledge these qualities within yourself with each breath you take. Do not have a single doubt about them. Understand them to be divine gifts given to you to support your path through this life. As they say in the tradition, from the path from darkness to light, from ignorance to knowledge, from the unreal to the real, from bondage to freedom. Know that you have been given everything you need. The rest is up to you. And draw the hands together in front of the heart. And we'll lift our voices in one Om and the invocation mantras. Taking a nice breath in. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om Ganana Antva Ganapati Gum Hava Mahe Kavin Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jesta Rajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata Anashrinvanuti Besidha Sadhanam Mahaganapataye Namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhir Vajinivati Dhinama Vitriyavatu Ano Devo Brahataf Parvatada Saraswati Ajata Gantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Jujushana Kritachi Shagmam Nova Chamushati Shrinotu Vagdevyai Namaha. And gently releasing the hands down and fluttering the eyes open. So there's that saying, you've been given everything that you need already. And sometimes we don't like the sound of that, Just like we don't like the sound of the universe will never give you anything you can't handle. We have a tendency to hear those types of statements and lump them into rose-colored glasses, or those types of statements that somehow don't grasp the depth of our suffering, the depth of our hopelessness, the depth of our incapacity to find happiness in this life. But the reality is that you have been given everything that you need. You have. But you've also been given free will. And so therein lies the double-edged sword. You have been given willpower, strength, courage, compassion, love, the ability to be peaceful. You've been given so much of everything that you need in order to pursue the truth of yourself in this life. But you've been given this other thing too, which is a blessing and a curse. You've been given free will. I've been given free will. That means that even though I've been given courage and it exists within me innately, I can say no. Even though I've been given compassion, compassion exists innately within me. I can say, no, not today. Too irritated. Thank you. Even though I've innately been given willpower, I can say, yeah, the cozy blanket and the hot chocolate sounds so much better. So willpower and free will go kind of hand in hand with one another, because if we don't exercise the muscle of willpower, then the free will becomes a bit lax, a bit lazy, So we really do need to at least explore the degree of willpower that we carry within ourselves. And that does necessitate that every once in a while we push ourselves. Or what seems like we push ourselves, Is it really pushing ourselves? No. What it actually is getting out of the stuck way of thinking. So, for example, an individual who says, I just can't go to sleep early. I know that if I would go to sleep early, then I could get up a half an hour earlier and I could then do my morning sadhana. But I'm a night person. I can't go to bed earlier. That's a stuck way of thinking. And how do we know it's a stuck way of thinking? Because there is not even a willingness to try, to explore, to see. There's not even a willingness to acknowledge that there might be some self-responsibility there. It might really just simply be a matter of you saying to yourself, off with the TV, off with the computer, into the nice warm blankets now, rather than staying there for an extra hour in the morning. But for some reason, we value the cozy warm blankets in the morning more than we do in the evening. It's kind of strange. So we are the problem. I guess what it comes down to, is that we get into these stuck ways of thinking. And when we're in that mode in life, we're not really open to exploring other possibilities. So in that regard, yoga teaches that there are 5 categories where we get really stuck, where we allow all of the gifts that we have been given to become a bit lax. We don't practice our willpower, our courage, our bravery, our compassion. We have a tendency not to practice clarity, and any other thing that you can list there. What we do practice when it comes to these 5 categories are the emotional qualities that actually end up harming us in the long run. We practice fear. We practice unresolvable anger. We practice dread. We practice doubt. We practice these types of things in these 5 categories that I'm about to talk to you about. So just know that if someone says to you, if you go to sleep a half an hour earlier, maybe you would wake up a half an hour earlier. If the first thing that comes to your mind is no, you're in a stuck place. You're not even willing to have the conversation with yourself, never mind another person. So what is that in yoga? What's the first category? Does anybody know? What's the first category? It's avidya, ignorance. Yeah. So avidya is the first category, A-V-I-D-Y-A, for those taking notes. Avidya. Vidya means wisdom. Avidya means no wisdom. No wisdom. And that's called ignorance. And oftentimes these 5 categories are talked about like they were a tree. And avidya, ignorance, is the trunk of the tree. It's the big problem. It's the issue, and the other 4 come from it. We wouldn't have to worry about the other 4 categories if it wasn't for ignorance. So ignorance is the foundational issue that brings forward these 5 categories of challenges to our inner peace, our willingness to come into a place of knowing ourselves, caring for each other, and living a life of quality. Ignorance is really interesting. Because I remember I was talking about it in class once years ago. And I tell this story often so that students understand. The moment you hear the word ignorance, did the hair on the back of your neck go up a little bit? No, you've probably heard me talk about it a few times. But for some students, it does. And this one student came up to me after class and said, I don't believe you called us ignorant. And I just sat and listened to her as she talked about how insulted she felt. And then when she was done, I said, may I respond? And she said, of course. And I said, tell me where in that conversation I called you ignorant. And she said, well, you didn't exactly call me ignorant. She said, but you did imply that like we're all ignorant. And I said, yes. Where do you find fault with that? And she said, well, I'm not stupid. And I said, ignorance isn't stupidity. They're not the same thing. I said, what does ignorance mean to you besides stupidity? She said, it just means that you're dumb and like, you know. And I said, well, if you look ignorance up in the dictionary, it says to ignore. It doesn't say that you don't have an intellect. It said that you're ignoring what is. So ignorance is to ignore what is. So an individual who is ignorant is not present to what is. Whether that is through not knowing, choosing, not having the awareness. But it doesn't say anything about stupidity at all. It has nothing to do with IQ. And we are all ignorant, without exception. Every one of us has some things, not just one, in our life that we are ignorant about. Can you name at least 3 to yourself right now silently where you know that you are practicing ignorance and there has been an unwillingness to utilize the muscle of willpower to change things completely? We can all name at least 3 things, maybe 30. Completely. So ignorance is a very important thing for us to contemplate, to think about, to explore, to look at, to ask, where in my life am I ignorant? And not looking at that question as if it were some kind of dagger to the heart, because it's not. It's actually what you really want to know. It's why you got onto a spiritual path in the first place. People don't typically get on the spiritual path unless they're looking to change the quality of their life somehow. And they recognize that the quality of their life is diminished when things aren't being seen in a proper balance, when we're not with life and capable of handling its ups and downs with some ideal strategy, in place, with some resiliency. So we need to look at it and say to ourselves, where am I coming from here? And this is the hard part, because once you start doing this with avidya, once you start acting face-to-face, confronting your own ignorance, the other 4 will start to mostly fall in place, mostly. So confronting ignorance takes care of a little bit of the other 4. But not confronting ignorance emboldens them, makes them so much more powerful. So the work necessitated here is that day in and day out, you need to be on the lookout. When you have those trigger point reactions, you need to take a breath. You don't have to go back and backpedal or anything like that, but you first need to say, that was a trigger pin reaction. Wow. I really do have those. Swamini wasn't pulling my leg. Okay. Acknowledgement, acceptance. It's like the first thing. And also the acknowledgement of where it happens. Maybe when you feel threatened by somebody, that you don't like. And so it's not really a true threat. It's a threat to the ego, right? Or maybe when you are by yourself. maybe there's a trigger there. Maybe when you're in the midst of tasty food, maybe there's a trigger there. When you're in Macy's, is there still a Macy's? And they're having their annual sale, is there a trigger there? Where is there a trigger? And how is that trigger, that knee-jerk reaction, related to ignorance? You will find a relationship. I guarantee it. If you look honestly for it, you will find a relationship between ignorance and whatever that behavior is. Even if it's something as simple as every Friday at 5 o'clock, I go to the ice cream parlor instead of the bar to have my weekly ice cream sundae. 3 bananas, 6 scoops of ice cream, loaded with all of the goodies. Even though that seems to be healthier than the alcohol at the bar, there's still a trigger there that causes you every Friday at 5 o'clock to do that instead of what? Go for a walk, have a salad, drink more water, sit down and meditate. There's still a trigger there. So when we think that we've found the first level of trigger, then we're automatically dropped into the second level. We work our way through there, and then it's the third level, and then it's the 5,000th level. And, like some of you have heard me say, we're very complicated onions. We are. We have thousands upon thousands of levels, and they stick together, So we think that just because we got through, you ever take an onion apart and it's got like that dry outer that's really easy to take and then you're like, oh yay, that was so simple. I got the outer level. But then you go to cut into that second level, and that's really the foul tasting stuff, right? It's like chewy, and that's the layer that you got to get through. But then you get through that layer, and now all the other layers are messy. So very messy. They stick together. They make you cry, I mean, you can be like this cutting the onion and you'll be like sobbing, or at least I will. I don't know. Sometimes I'm sitting in that kitchen cutting onions and I'm like, why is this happening to me? My hands aren't even near my face, But that's what we are like. We're like that. We have a bunch of messy layers. And the foundational connection between the suffering that each of those layers brings forth is ignorance. So what's the first branch off of ignorance? The first branch off of ignorance is called Ashmita, A-S-M-I-T-A, Ashmita. And that means me. Me. And I don't mean me as in what my grandkids call me. I mean me, M-E, with a capital M. I am of the utmost importance. It's the story of me. That's the first branch off of ignorance, is that we get into the ego. And the ego's attachment to the story of me. Oh. Yeah. Well, I don't want to hear about your suffering. You got to hear about my suffering. Because my suffering is so much more important than your suffering. So the story of me oftentimes leads us to a place of selfishness, self-centeredness, egotism, apathy. And it further enhances ignorance as we actually look upon the suffering of other beings and we ignore it. Because we start to believe things like, well, I'm suffering so deeply that I could never support them in any way, so to heck with them. We refuse to stop the car to move the turtle out of the road. We put ourself first most of the time, if not all of the time, and not for safety reasons, but for lazy reasons and for selfish reasons. And when we behave that way, the ego gets happy. The ego says, yeah, now I can tell you what I want and you'll go do it. Go get the ice cream. Go buy the new car. Go get the credit card with the bigger balance. Go on a shopping spree. Go to the bar. Go wherever you want to go. Fill up the pleasure. Do all that. and then you'll be happy. Nope, not at all. Not at all. Only the individual who is working to cut through the veil of ignorance understands that that is the biggest lie that we tell ourselves. Then you will be happy. There is no then. There's only now. And whatever is keeping you from being happy is now. It's right here, right now. And the only thing that is right here and right now is you and your choice to say now is not good enough. But some other unknown, potentially never happening time, that's what holds the key. So when we start working in the realm of Ashmita, the story of me, the story of self-centeredness, we start looking at that. Like, where do I place myself, in comparative importance to other people? Do I look down on people? Do I put myself on a pedestal? One of the major symptoms of Ashmita is prejudice. When we look at other people, whether they be, a different skin color, a different gender, a different sex, a different age, a different body weight, whatever it happens to be, the criteria that you're using to elevate yourself while demeaning another human being or any other being is a symptom of Ashmita. And it means that it's deeply ingrained. And that ignorance is being further empowered. So if those tendencies are alive within you, to look at other people and to say things about them in order to lift your own self up, you have to call yourself on that. You need to say, no more. And when you find that you're becoming in that mode of judgmental demeaning, then you stop yourself and have something that you say instead. I had a good friend of mine, she had road rage. And seriously, I would not get in the car with her. She had road rage. And she would drive down the New Jersey Parkway. And it didn't matter. Like, people could be staying in their own lane far away from her, and she would have something to say about it. And so we had this really great conversation. And she was asking, like, why am I not a happier person? And I was like, well, let's start with the road rage first, okay? How can you be happy if you're wishing such horrible things on other people? And she was like, you really think there's a relationship there? And I said, I don't know. Let's find out, shall we? So instead, she said, okay, well, how about if I do this? I'll stop myself, and instead of saying anything negative about anybody, I'll just say, may you get where you're bleeping going safely without hurting anybody. And I said, well, how about we make it this? May you arrive safely. And so she begrudgingly said, okay. And she did it. It was very hard at first. We used to laugh because it was so hard. She would be like, just, I wanted to say. And but she stuck with it, and she started doing it. It became her habit, And at some point, I just kind of checking in with her, and she said, yeah, shit, it makes all the difference in the world. She's like, but the horrible thing about it is that now I got to look at all the other places where I'm like, talking about people, like at the water cooler at work, or when I'm talking to my coworkers about my boss or my spouse about those people down the road. Now I have to look at every other place, because when you know. And you can't just leave the wound half-dressed. Otherwise, the infection spreads. Does that make sense? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So Ashmita is the wound, for sure. It's the wound that is empowered by ignorance, right? By avidya. And it's the wound that emboldens the other three. The next one is raga. Raga is pleasure. And pleasure is attachment. So when we have raga, we are constantly seeking out that which we like, which brings us some kind of temporary happiness. Did something come to mind, Pam? I saw that face. It's like, give me something. Give me the ice cream. Give me the new car, the popularity. Whatever it is, it's going to make me feel good. I want to feel satisfied. I want to feel like I'm not lacking. I want to feel like I'm on top of the world. I want to feel powerful. This is an issue in the spiritual communities today, right? Because what we see a lot of the time, it's unfortunate, but we see a lot of people getting hurt because they jump into situations looking for power. You don't start with that power. You have to start from a humble place. And what happens is when you're looking for power, someone else who thinks they have power will use their power to overcome you and to exploit you for the sake of what they think they need. They won't help you. And we see this in the yoga world today. I have a good friend who years ago came through our teacher training and then went out into the world and started teaching yoga. And there was a little place she used to practice at. And she really wanted to teach there because she really enjoyed the community. So she had talked to the owner there, a little bit and said, well, I'm a yoga teacher. If you ever need a substitute, please let me know and I'd be happy to come and as a service. And as soon as she had that conversation, something really interesting happened. She came back to me and she said, I don't know what to do about this. She said, but when I'm in class, this teacher does hands-on adjustments that are really personal. And she never did them before. So the person I'm talking about is a female, and the owner of the studio is a female. And so don't kid yourself that, like men are the problem, because men aren't the problem, the ego is the problem. And our drive toward having our desires fulfilled is the problem. And so she said, I'm really sad because I like this community, but this person is like, I just feel insulted. I feel violated. I don't know what I feel. And she was going on. And I said, well, what's the safety thing for you to do? And she said, well, the safety thing would be for me to perhaps tell her because, give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she doesn't realize what she's doing, but it's pretty obvious she does. And she never asks permission to even touch, She said, so then if she didn't listen at that point, I guess the safety thing would be to walk away. And I said, yeah, you already know what to do. Why aren't you doing it? She said, well, because it's hard, because I like the community there. I like the space. The space is so pretty. They have it so nicely decorated. Have you ever stayed someplace completely uncomfortable because it was nicely decorated? Yeah, totally. Completely. It's so human of us. It really is. We have to look beyond the decoration. What's that saying? You can put lipstick on a pig? And it's still a pig. Isn't that a saying, right? Yeah. I love pigs, okay? They don't need lipstick. I think they're so adorable. But yeah, the saying says something. But when our desires are so in control of us, we don't really care much for the inconvenience of the suffering that is imposed upon us as we're looking toward getting ourselves satisfied in some level, some way, shape, or form. Whether it's somebody telling us we matter, we're important, we're powerful. There's scandals throughout the world with people telling other people, well, I can tell you how to be powerful, but there's a cost. And it's like, if there's a cost, I don't want anything to do with it. I want nothing to do with it. Nope. Why? Not because I'm not willing to do the work. By all means, I am absolutely 100% willing to do the work. For me, I'm not 100% willing to do the work for somebody else. And what I mean by that is we can serve all beings everywhere in order to work toward the alleviation of suffering. But what we don't serve is the ego. So when a person comes to you and says, you have to do this for me, the answer is, no, I don't have to do anything. That's your misunderstanding. When somebody comes to me and says, well, I have more power than you, but I can show you how to unlock it. All you have to do is behave the way I want you to. I said, no. That's not my path to walk. My path to walk is to read the teachings, study the teachings, embody the teachings, fall down a few times, pick myself back up a few times, teach from that place of experience. If you're going to hear, you're going to hear, and if you're not going to hear, you're not going to hear. That's not my business. My business is not to make you hear. You cannot make the horse drink water. It doesn't work that way. So there has to be this thing called radical self-responsibility, which is antithetical to pleasure, at least initially. Radical self-responsibility means I'm willing to fall down and I'm willing to pick myself back up and not blame you for it. And the way that I avoid blaming you for it is I don't put it upon you to begin with. There's levels to that, you know. There's levels to that. What is reasonable expectation? Reasonable expectation in a relationship is that the other person does not harm you. That's reasonable expectation, absolutely. You can put that on somebody else. But you cannot expect it to actually be the case, right? Because our perception of being hurt is highly dependent upon the health of our ego. So I might say to my good friend Heather, we have this really wonderful friendship, and our friendship is based on, you never being rude to me. And then one day Heather walks in, and she's been having a busy, busy day, and she doesn't see me standing there, so she walks past. And I say, well, she was rude to me. Was she really rude to me? Or is that just my ego out of control? Yeah. So we also have to be willing to look at that and say, what am I accusing you of that you actually didn't do? This is all part of avidya, asmita, and raga. It's all part of it, is being able to look and to see with some kind of clarity, what is my responsibility? What actually does belong to me? And what doesn't belong to me? And then, as best you can, don't pick up the things that don't belong to you, because they don't belong to you. That's stealing. Yeah? Yes. Doesn't that change the idea just a little bit? So when you pick up someone else's egotistical wounds and try to fix them by making yourself pliable to their demands, what are you doing? But you're stealing their work from them. You're pacifying them rather than reality check. So we don't need to do that. Feed the hungry, support the individuals, whether they're humans or other, who need support in that kind of a way, who are truly suffering. And when you see somebody who's behaving from the ego, just wish them well. Be like my friend with the car. May you arrive safely. Leave the explicatives out. Desire is so powerful that in the Devi Mahatmya, they gave the desire the name Rakta Bija. Rakta, blood. Bija, seed, the blood seed. The demon, which is a blood seed. And in this scripture, Rakta Bija is explained as being a demon who, in battle, when a single drop of blood falls to the ground, 10,000 more of him arise. The imperishable army. He's desire. To relate to that, all you ever have to do is think of one thing that you gave up, and how many other things took its place. When I was a smoker, in my younger days, yes, I was a very heavy smoker. It went along with the drinking. When I gave up smoking, I picked up food, cursing, chocolate, and probably more alcohol. So 4 for the price of 1. You know, that's what desire is like. You try to put one down and you pick up many, many others without even realizing it to make up for what it is that you subconsciously think that you lost. So when we put down a habit, we have to be certain that that blood seed doesn't take hold. We need to be certain that we know what we're filling that space with. And so at some point in my early 20s, I became aware of that. Through these teachings and through Buddhist teachings, became aware of some of those tendencies and said, well, if I'm going to put something down, then I better look at what I'm putting there. So I put meditation there. I put pranayama practices there. I put mantra there. Put getting on the yoga mat and just standing in downward facing dog for an hour and a half until the want of a cigarette or a chocolate left me. You know, so I made other choices. And that's what we have to do, is make the other choices so that the seed does not take sprout. Because it is the worst weed in the garden. It will continually haunt you. It's like tansy in the garden, right, Az? Do you know I'm still pulling the little babies as they come out. So tansy is this tree-like herb, beautiful looking crazy thing. And it grows huge. It's got this big root on it. And it sends off its babies like crazy. So we had a huge one in the garden over here a couple of years back. And it just became such an invasive situation that I decided to pull it. Pulled it, dug out all of the roots, happy. The next year, there were 10,000 babies. Oh my gosh, everywhere. Just one by one, took them one by one, tossed them in the woods. And then the next year, there were fewer. But every once in a while, I'd go to a part of the garden where like the flowers were lush, and hidden in there would be a 2-foot tall tansy. That took hold because we didn't see it because of all of the other pretty decorations around it, you know? So we really do have to be mindful of what we're planting, how we're tending to the garden, and the decorations that we're using to cover up the weeds that we don't want to be bothered pulling. All right. So then we come to the 4th category. And the 4th category is Devesa, D-V-E-S-A. And it's the S with the dot under. Devesa. Avoidance. Aversion. Goes hand in hand with desire. I want this, I do not want that. And it is as strong as desire. Because if you think about the biggest thing in your life that you want to avoid, whether it is a spider or a person or a feeling, you will go to the greatest extents in order to avoid it. The feelings that we try to avoid, we shove them so far down that we become like a pressure cooker. And then we're like, why do I have this regurgitation happening? Why do I have a knot here? Why do I get so angry over seemingly nothing? What are you holding down there that's causing that? What is it? What feeling is it that you're afraid of? What memory? What thought? What idea? What fear? Fear is a huge one. We say, I'm not afraid of anything. Yes, you are. Of course you are. You're a human being. How can you not be afraid of anything? We're human beings. We're pretty much afraid of everything. You know? We're afraid of being born. We're afraid of dying. And we're afraid of every freaking thing in between. We're afraid. It's part of being in the world. You hear a story. So a good friend the other day is driving down the road, and this is seriously like the 20th person I know this has happened to. Big old branch falls off of a tree, hits her windshield, bounces off, hits the back of her car, smashes in the back windshield, gives a nice big dent in the car. And it's like, are you okay? Everything was okay. Everybody in the car was okay, but the car is not okay. But now, what's the impression? Pennsylvania roads, after the 20th story like that, those trees are dangerous. So what happens? You become afraid. You become afraid of driving down the street because you know so many people that this has happened to. And then you become hypervigilant. And in your hypervigilant, you're looking for the branch, but you're not looking for the deer or the child or the other car. You're distracted. And in that distraction, a lot can happen. A lot can happen. So we have to be really mindful about the aversion, where that takes us to, the lengths that we're willing to go to avoid what we want to avoid. Because they're just as drastic, if not more so, than the lengths we're willing to go to get what we desire. And when we go to such great lengths to avoid things, we're actually weakening ourselves. We're becoming weak. We're allowing our resiliency to rest entirely too much. It's like in yin class. There's one posture that everybody avoids, at least one, right? What is your posture? Where you'll get up and walk out of the room and I have to go to the bathroom, right? Because you're like, I'm not doing another swan pose. I am not doing another pigeon pose. In an active class, I am not doing handstand. Like when I used to practice with the Jivamukti tradition, seriously, would come to the point where it would be handstand time. Half the class would have to go to the bathroom. And Sharon Gannon, one of the two founders of that tradition, she would always laugh. She'd be like, yep, handstand time. Good time to go to the bathroom now. Line out the bathroom is so long that they conveniently miss the handstand and the shoulder stand, and the forearm stand. We go to such great lengths to avoid things that it creates a laziness in us, a lethargy in us. And lethargy is one of the primary symptoms of suffering. Absolutely. Absolutely. If we want to be resilient, and is there anybody in here who doesn't want to be resilient? Nobody's hand went up. No? You all want to be resilient. So if you want to be resilient, then that means that you have to sit with what is uncomfortable sometimes. You have to be willing to do that. You have to be willing to say, I hate handstand, but I'm going to work with it anyway. Unless you have a really good reason, like a shoulder injury or something. You have to be willing to sit with pigeon pose. Prop yourself up as much as you need to, but stay there. Because in facing your discomfort and in learning the difference between discomfort and pain, you cultivate naturally within yourself a resiliency that will serve all other parts of your life. But if you continue to run away from swan posture, you're going to continue to run away from whatever you're running away from. Because when you run away, what do you do to yourself? You demean yourself. You doubt yourself. You tell yourself, I'm not strong enough. And that's one of the number one things that I hear from people. I'm not strong enough. That's just not me. I don't have that kind of strength. Like, how would you know? You never exercise that muscle because you run away. Stay. Hold your ground. Find out how strong you are, how resilient you can be. You don't stay by stomping 2 feet into the ground and saying, I'm going to show you how strong I am. No, that's not what strength is all about. Strength is not about other people. Strength is not about showing other people anything. Strength is about fortitude, internal discipline, compassionate discipline. Strength is about you being able to be steadfast on your journey toward the recognition of your own self. That's what strength is about. It's about you showing you who you are. Who cares what anybody else thinks? They don't know what they are. How are they ever going to approve of you? They may bolster you up and say lots of nice things, but those words are, even if they're well-intended, they're not, they don't have any carrying value to them. Because, and you've probably all been here, one person will say to you, "Oh, you're such a nice person. You're so kind." And for that, 15 seconds, you'll feel on top of the world because this person gave you a compliment. And then you'll get in the car and you'll call your best friend and you'll be like, I feel like such a jerk because I was rude to that person in the store. And your best friend says, "Oh my gosh, you're the furthest thing from a jerk." Okay, now your ego's got two hits. Two hits of something it likes. Well, who else can I call now? Okay, because I know that they've reassured me, but who else can I get reassurance from? So now you call your mother or your father or your brother or your sister or your other friend. Somebody. You'll call the people who will continue to reinforce that. And so you're looking for this reinforcement from outside yourself, and in the meantime, you don't believe it, because if you believed it, you wouldn't have to ask. People say, "Oh, I know. I know what the teachings say. I know what the practices give me." Do you? If you did, you would be doing it more than saying it. You would be living it more than justifying it. So practice more, justify less. Because what I think, what anybody thinks, is not what matters. What you think about you is what matters. But when we're stuck in that place of Devesha and Raga and Ashmita and all of it, then our mind is cloudy and confused and we don't really know what to think. The last one, they say, is the hardest of all of them to overcome. And that's Abhinivesha. 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 And that is, it's described in two different ways. The first is clinging to life, and the other is afraid of death. And this is the big one. This is actually, everything comes from the trunk, right? So everything comes from avidya, ignorance. But what is that ignorance really grounded in? It's like Abhinivesha is the soil around the tree that feeds that ignorance. It's the clinging to life or the fear of death that pushes us, that drives us. It says, I don't want this to end. I don't want this life to end, this relationship to end, this job to end, this moment to end, this vacation to end, this happiness to end, this satisfaction to end, this desire to end, this feeling to end, this impulse to end, this wealth to end. I don't want any of it to end. I don't want it to die. I don't want to die. And everything follows from there. Because we are so afraid of the concept of death, we hide in ignorance and pretend that we will live forever and that we can have whatever we want, whenever we want. You know what? The one thing that those self-help attract all the money in the world to you books don't tell you is that along with money comes debt. Along with good comes bad. Along with enjoyable comes not enjoyable. Along with whatever you acquire comes its opposite, because they go hand in hand with one another. You don't get happy without sad. As long as you're looking at happiness as a worldly indulgence, you will always have sadness right on the tail end, going, when's it my turn? When's it my turn? It's almost my turn. And then now it's my turn. Always. And that's because we live in a world of opposites. Everything is opposite. We're inside, that's outside. You have female, male, tall, short, young, old, black, white, dark, light. It's always sweet, sour. Everything, you cannot pick anything in this materialized universe and say one quality that does not have an opposite. If you think of one, let me know. And it's just like a quarter. If somebody gives you a quarter, you don't get half the quarter, you get both heads and tails. So you will always have both sides. But in fear of death and grasping to life, we say, I only want the one side. I don't want the partner. I don't want the accompanying quality. But the accompanying quality is naturally, innately there. There's no escaping it. No one's ever not died. No moment has ever not passed. No person has ever gone unchanged. Ever. The only thing that doesn't change, the only thing that is constant, is consciousness. And consciousness is beyond the material world, beyond the universe. It's within the universe because it is the universe, but it's also beyond the universe. It's something that is so abstract, so not of what we understand life to be or presence to be. We have a difficult, if not impossible, task trying to understand consciousness. But in the teachings it says, the only thing that is constant is consciousness. The flow of consciousness. Always flowing, always moving. But everything that it manifests, it maintains, and it drops away. So nothing that has manifested will ever last. So then why are we so attached to everything? Well, because we're emotional human beings. That's why. Because we put sentimental value to things. And we say, this helps me to define myself. This helps me to remember the people that I love. This does that. That's a good memory. So we hold on to these things. But the more that we hold on to things, they suggest, the more in the past we're living. The more we're looking to try to recreate the past. You can't recreate the past. But why do you want to recreate the past? Because you don't know what tomorrow holds. You don't know where you'll be, where the path is going to lead you to tomorrow. So it's called the mystery. Whereas the past is now known. You know. You had your ups, you had your downs, you survived it because you're here today. And more of that, please. Rather than saying, whatever was a beautiful gift. Whatever is a beautiful gift. And whatever will be tomorrow will be another beautiful gift. And I'll just work to be present in all three. The fear of physiological death is really interesting. And there's a man, I can never remember what his name is. He has a science show, not Bill Nye guy, but he had a science show on television. He's a scientist. He talks about the universe a lot, and he's a black man. Who is he?
Neil deGrasse.
Yes, Neil deGrasse. So if you ever watch one of his specials where there's a young blonde girl who is like the daughter of the universe or something, that's actually my cousin's child. Yeah. It took me a moment to get that out. But anyway, so Neil deGrasse, he was talking to somebody in an interview one time, and I don't know if it was Jay Shetty or somebody else, but it was some other, very intellectual person, and they're talking about death. And the one person is like, well, I don't care what the odds are. Just hook me up to whatever machines there are, put me in cryostasis, do what you got to do. I ain't going. I want to stay here, And Neil looked at me and he said, why are you so afraid? And he said, well, I couldn't tell you. I just don't want to go there. I like it here. It's colorful, it's bright, it's distracting. Keep me here. And he goes, but why would you be so afraid of there when that's where you came from? You came from there, and when you got here, did you say, oh my God, I hated it there. It was so horrible. It was a nightmare. Did you arrive here complaining? No. When you arrived here, you were happy. You were sweet. You were innocent. And this place corrupted you. So why on earth would you want to stay here and not go back there? And when he said that, I went, whoa. Whoa. I'm going to have to use that in class one day. And I have quite a few times. Because it's powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, you were an innocent, sweet little baby at some point in your life who had absolutely no idea about, anything except innocence. And so if you are a reflection of the place where you came from, well, then the place where you came from must have been pretty sweet. So why so afraid? And then in the yoga teachings, of course, it says, it's like changing coats. Yes, you leave this particular body. This body is not who you are. The soul within you is who you are. And the soul migrates from this life to the next to the next. And it just changes the jacket, changes the coat that it's wearing. So you have nothing to worry about. You're not losing yourself. You will never lose yourself. Yourself cannot be lost. Capital S self. It's the little s self that falls away. But hey, in all honesty, you don't really like her or him too much anyway, do you? If you did, if you loved him or her so much, you wouldn't be allowing yourself to exist in a state of ignorance quite so often. You wouldn't be seeking happiness outside of yourself. You wouldn't be avoiding the truths of yourself. And yet we cling to that little S self with no mercy. We cling. And we say, nope, you're going to stay until you're exactly what I want you to be. All right, let me do a time check. Yeah, that's pretty good. It's 12:29. Questions or reflections?
I have a question.
Yes.
I don't know how to word it. Well, thank you. There was so much to sit with. There was so much. So thank you so much. I think the one thing, I'm not sure how I'm going to word it, so I just let it flow. But in this journey of healing and awareness and learning and stuff, a lot of the things that needed to fall away, I've gotten better at letting them fall away. And where I'm at now is I'm having to shift very close relationships, and that with that shift then brings harm and hurt to those loved ones. And even though I know that's for them and it's not for me, it's really hard for me to not feel really guilty about, even though I know I need to do it for myself and my wellness, and I know in return if they choose to receive that, they will too benefit from that shift if they want to. I have no control over that, but I still feel extreme guilt and hurt when I shift for the greater good in regards to the people that are fading away. Does that make sense?
It does. And I suggest you look at it differently.
Okay.
So first of all, you're not hurting them.
Okay.
Period.
Yeah.
You're not hurting them. So look at them with compassion, right? See their struggle with compassion, because they have the same exact fears that you've been struggling with.
Yeah.
They're afraid that if you change, that it's going to imply that their greatest fears about their own self are true. Mm-hmm. They're putting that off on you. And people do this. So everybody, you do this, everybody does this. Okay? So have compassion for the struggle that they're in.
Yeah.
And understand that if their perspective was a healthy perspective, they would in turn actually be grateful that you're doing what you need to do for yourself, but they can't.
Right.
Just like you cannot in this moment, or perhaps are having difficulty in this moment, being grateful for the struggle they find themselves in, knowing that there is a light at the end of that tunnel. So gratitude works both ways.
Yeah.
To be grateful for you discovering your own inner resiliency and capacity to follow your own path, and then also to experience gratitude when you do see someone struggling, because because you truly know inside of yourself that there is a light at the end of the tunnel of struggling. All they have to do is allow themselves to be open to it. But if you hold them hostage in any way, shape, or form to their judgment over the way that you're walking your path and living your life, if you're holding them hostage to that, then you're keeping them from the light.
Yeah.
So you need to leave them alone. And you need to just understand that they're in the same exact place that you have been a million times in your own life. And you have found your way through, so why wouldn't they find theirs?
Yeah.
Yes. And then stop the comparison right there. Because they're no different than you. They've had different details in their life. They've had different struggles in their life, perhaps. But in this regard, they're lost in some capacity, and they'll be found in some capacity for whatever it is that they're meant to know in this life. And your path is not dependent upon them approving of it. So stop seeking that approval. Why can't they understand me? Because in this moment, they can't. So stop asking them to. It's like asking a blind person to see the world. They can't. They can't. Have compassion for that. And then have compassion for yourself, because the spiritual path is not a popular place to be, contrary to what, the billion-dollar commercialization industry would have you believe. It's not full of sparkles and, unicorns that poop ice cream and whatnot. It's just not. As a matter of fact, your spiritual path is a very lonely place at times, because you're the only one who can walk it. Your children cannot walk your path for you. Your partner cannot walk your path for you. You have to walk your path. And sometimes that entails making decisions that other people don't like. But you can't change that about them, so don't try. Their like or dislike. And when they come to you and they say, oh my gosh, I see it now so clearly, Holly, I see it now. I am just so happy for you, and I'm so glad that you decided to take this path. I know it took me a while to realize it, and then all of a sudden the ego comes forward and says, finally I'm vindicated. Don't look for vindication, because it's just another trap of the desires. Yeah. Just be like, thank you. That's nice. Because they could forget again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because we all do. Completely. It's a great, great question.
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thoughts? Any other thoughts, questions, or reflections? That was a lot, wasn't it? I know, I was like, maybe I should break this down into 2 talks. Usually it's 5 weeks.
Wow.
You have 5 weeks of talks. 1 week on each subject. But
I just want to say one more thing.
yeah, go ahead.
I really enjoyed the good and the bad. It makes me think about how in the yin or anything when you go through that bad, on the other side of that is that freedom and that expansion, and then it weaves its way into that conversation about shifting away from people how when that hardness comes in, instead of looking at it as, looking at it as, whoa, here's another opportunity for me to grow, and then welcome in love, light.
And any hesitation that you have is your fear that your life will not be the same if they stay mad at you.
Yeah.
But you don't know. Maybe their distress serves a purpose.
Yeah.
Maybe they have to be distressed.
Right. In
order for you to build the courage to break out of that cycle. Mm-hmm. You just don't know. And because we don't know, we just have to have faith. If we can muster that within ourselves and say, there's 10,000 different ways this can go. Like Krishna told Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, you don't have a right to the outcome. You only have a right to the work. That's all. The work that is present in front of you right now is what you have a right to. What that work comes out to be doesn't belong to you. You cannot control it. So you can try your best to appease people. You can try your best to meet their expectations. And then you wonder, well, why aren't they happy? Well, they're not happy because they're not happy.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with you. They're just using you as an excuse. Mm-hmm. If only you would do this. No, they'll find something else to be miserable about. That's what this human life is. There's not a degree of satisfaction that lives beyond a few moments. There really isn't. But there is happiness, true happiness. And that's a completely different conversation. That's the contentment that comes from within as a response, or as a result, rather, of cultivating resiliency to the distractions and distresses of the world. That when we cultivate that resiliency within ourselves, that we can stay content because we understand it's just all part of the process. It's all part of the karma that's playing itself out. And if we just leave it be in strategic moments, it'll play itself out. The top will stop spinning because nothing stays the same. No, not a thing. They will not be mad forever. Maybe this life, but that's not forever. And in next life, they'll be your BFF. We all come together we've known each other lifetimes. We have. Some other life you were sitting here. Amber was sitting here. Rasa was sitting here. Some other life we were hiking through the woods or swimming in the ocean or doing something. But it's just different. And it always is. So we don't have to cling to it. We don't have to be like, well, they have to like me. They have to approve of me. They have to make it valid for me. Nope, they don't. They can't. It's not possible. Only you can make it valid for you. Yeah. Let's sit tall. Close the eyes. And draw the hands together in front of the heart. And in this moment, have deep compassion for yourself. And deep compassion for all the beings who surround you. And all the beings beyond that. Particularly the human beings, because they have the biggest issues. Animals, not so much. They don't have this capacity to create a dilemma in their own ego that we know of anyway. But have compassion for their suffering at the hands of our dilemma. And have compassion for the planet and how the planet is put under such stress because of our dilemma. And may our dilemma be resolved into a higher grace, one that allows us to truly know ourselves and move beyond these 5 categories of suffering. We'll lift our voices in one Om. Take a breath in. Om Shri Matre Namaha. Thank you all so much for being here today. So good to gather with each and every one of you. Good to see you. Thank you all. If you haven't had brunch, do have some and enjoy.